Welcome to History in a Hurry. Next in our war series, we will cover the Cold War. The Cold War, lasting from roughly 1947 to 1991, was a prolonged geopolitical, ideological, and economic struggle between the United States and its allies in the capitalist West and the Soviet Union and its communist bloc in the East. Although the two superpowers never engaged in direct military conflict, their rivalry dominated global affairs, shaping the second half of the 20th century and influencing political, military, and cultural developments worldwide. The origins of the Cold War lay in the aftermath of World War II. The wartime alliance between the U.S. and the Soviet Union began to unravel as their ideological differences became stark. The U.S., committed to democracy and free markets, viewed the spread of communism as a direct threat to global stability and its interests. The Soviet Union, on the other hand, sought to expand its influence by promoting socialist revolutions and consolidating control over Eastern Europe. By the late 1940s, Europe was divided by the Iron Curtain, a term coined by Winston Churchill to describe the ideological and physical boundary separating East and West. Key to the Cold War's early years was the implementation of the Truman Doctrine in 1947, which pledged U.S. support to countries resisting communist expansion. This policy was exemplified by the Marshall Plan, an economic aid program that rebuilt Western Europe's economies to counter Soviet influence. In response, the Soviets tightened their grip on Eastern Europe, establishing satellite states and forming the Warsaw Pact in 1955 to rival NATO. The Western Military Alliance formed in 1949. The Cold War also played out in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, where both superpowers vied for influence. In Asia, the Chinese Communist Revolution in 1949 brought Mao Zedong to power, creating another communist giant. The Korean War, from 1950 to 1953, was one of the first significant military conflicts of the Cold War, pitting North Korea, backed by China, and the Soviet Union against South Korea, supported by the United States and UN forces. The arms race was a defining feature of the Cold War. Both the U.S. and the Soviet Union developed vast nuclear arsenals, leading to a precarious balance of power known as mutually assured destruction, (MAD). Ultimately, negotiations between U.S. President John F. Kennedy and Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev diffused the crisis, highlighting the need for improved communication and diplomacy during this tense period. Space exploration became another arena of competition, known as the space race. The Soviet Union achieved early milestones with the launch of Sputnik in 1957, the first artificial satellite, and Yuri Gagarin's historic orbit in 1961. The U.S. responded with its Apollo program, culminating in the moon landing in 1969, a symbolic victory in the struggle for technological and ideological supremacy. The Cold War's global impact was evident in numerous proxy wars, where the superpowers supported opposing sides in local conflicts. The Vietnam War, from 1955 to 1975, was a particularly devastating example, with the U.S. attempting to prevent communist North Vietnam from overtaking South Vietnam. In Latin America, the U.S. supported anti-communist regimes and intervened in countries like Chile and Nicaragua, while the Soviets backed revolutionary movements. In Africa, newly independent nations often became battlegrounds for Cold War influence, with conflicts in Angola, Ethiopia, and elsewhere reflecting the broader struggle. The Cold War also deeply influenced domestic politics and culture. In the United States, fears of communist infiltration led to McCarthyism in the 1950s, a period of intense anti-communist suspicion. In the Soviet Union, strict censorship and suppression of dissent maintained the communist regime's grip on power. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, tensions heightened again, marked by the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 and the U.S. escalation of military spending under President Ronald Reagan. Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, dubbed Star Wars, aimed to develop a missile defense system, further straining the already faltering Soviet economy. Meanwhile, internal challenges within the Soviet Union, including economic stagnation and growing dissent, weakened its hold on power. The turning point came in the mid-1980s with the rise of Mikhail Gorbachev as Soviet leader. Gorbachev introduced reforms such as glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, to address the Soviet Union's deep-seated problems. In 1989, a wave of revolution swept across the Eastern Bloc, leading to the fall of the Berlin Wall, the symbolic end of the Cold War divide. The dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 marked the formal end of the Cold War. The U.S. emerged as the sole superpower, while the newly independent states of the former Soviet Union faced the challenges of transitioning to market economies and democratic governance. The Cold War's legacy continues to shape international relations, with many conflicts and alliances today rooted in this pivotal period of history. In sum, the Cold War was a multifaceted and global struggle that defined much of the 20th century. It was characterized by ideological rivalry, military brinkmanship, and an enduring quest for dominance. While the conflict avoided direct superpower confrontation, its impact on nations and peoples worldwide was profound and continues to influence the modern world. Thanks for racing through history with us on History in a Hurry. If you enjoyed today's quick dive into the past, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a fast-paced trip through time. Please reply in the comments with ideas for our next history lesson. See you in the next one.